Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
Hey, Warner for the Low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We have a great podcast for you as we are going to be taking a look at what we all got in the All-Star game today. And then in segment number 2, we're going to be joined by William Boor. He does great work over at Action Network, taking a look at this great game of baseball that we all know and love. And we're going to be diving in with him about what we're going to be seeing here in the second half of the season, some of the teams that he's feeling bullish/bearish on, how to take a look at things with regards to the trade deadline, and so much more. So a little bit of a shorter podcast today. Next 2 days, we don't have any games, but I'll still be with you guys for these next 2 days. And then moving forward, I'll still be with you guys every single day, and that is for the entirety of the season. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is brought to you by Edge Boost. Over at Edge Boost, they are making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds for all gambling-related transactions. When you go to edgeboost.bet, make sure you use that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll give you a $1 for $1 match on your first deposit of up to $25. Now let's take a look back at what we all got in the All-Star game on Tuesday. I don't think that there's a lot of trends to be found, but you know what? We will get to know these guys a little bit better, and we will take a look at what was a very, very fun All-Star game.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
The National League gets up in this one by a count of 6-0. They do pee away the lead, but they do win the home run derby in the end, as this was a very, very fun and rambunctious game, to say the least, as Brent Rooker was able to go yard in this game. Corbin Carroll was able to, as well as in the bottom of the 6th inning, big shot was had by Pete Alonso, as he was able to put the NL up by a count of 5-0. Looked like things were done from there, as Tariq Skubal actually had a little bit of a rough outing, as he gave up 2 runs in the 1st inning, and it was a very, very rough 6th inning, as well as you had Chris with the K. Bubich give up a trio of runs, and additionally, you had a run given up by Casey Mize in 2/3 of an inning. As on the American League side of things, Carlos Rodon, Brian Wu, Joe Ryan, Drew Rasmussen all supplied scoreless innings along Carlos Estevez, and then Shane Smith, Andres Munoz combined for a scoreless inning along with Aroldis Chapman. And then on the National League side of things, Paul Skeens was able to give you a scoreless inning, but for Clayton Kershaw, Jason Adam, they combined for a scoreless inning. It was Audrey Morejon who gave up 2 runs without recording an out, or Randy Rodriguez gave up 1 of his own with getting 2 outs out of the bullpen. It was Logan Webb, David Peterson, Mackenzie Gore, Andrew Abbott, all being able to give you scoreless innings, but Robert Suarez, who has been a little bit testy here this season, he did give up the 2 runs in the 9th inning, as Jacob Izrowski, the rookie that was much acclaimed coming into this game, he was able to lend a scoreless inning, and then Trevor McGill, Edwin Diaz, they both got a pair of outs out of the bullpen scoreless. And with regards to the All-Star game itself, with regards to that home run derby, Kyle Schwarber be able to come through with a pretty clutch home run. Jonathan Aranda, he did not get a home run in any of his 3 swings, and the National League was able to win the swing off by a count of 4-3, and there was Pete Alonso waiting on deck if it went to a little bit of a later circumstance as well. So, and that was very interesting, as in that swing off, Brent Rooker had 2 home runs, Randy Arozarena had 1, Jonathan Aranda did not have any, and Kyle Stowers 1 home run for the National League, and Kyle Schwarber 3 home runs. And I thought that this was a great way to be able to end it, especially given the fact that we had ourselves just a lot of fun in general these last 2 days, and always do love the All-Star game, always do love the home run derby, and it's better than the Ghost Runner, I will say that. The Ghost Runner doesn't necessarily sit well with me, but I love home run derbies, and I love the fact that we had a great game on Tuesday. And coming up next, I think that we're in for a great second half of the season. We're going to be chatting about that and so much more with William Boor of Action Network right here on the Baseball Betting Show. Myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as William Boor. He does such great work over at Action Network. Take a look at this great game that we all know and love of baseball. I mean, really, over at Action Network, they do a little bit of everything, from hot dog eating competitions to taking a look at baseball and football and so much more. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at WBoor. That is the letter W and then BOOR all together. And it's always great to have you aboard. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, Greg. Always happy to hop on and talk baseball with you.
Absolutely. And when it comes to taking a look at this great game of baseball, William, it is a very interesting circumstance here in which we've got ourselves the All-Star break. And how do you take a look at things for the second half of the season? And how do you take a look at what we're going to be getting moving forward?
Yeah, I think from a betting perspective, if you're someone who's big into futures or even just has a couple, this is definitely a good time to reset, see where you're at. If you're on track to cash your futures, if you want to double down on something, if you want to hedge to get out of something, just a good time to take inventory of what you're doing as far as betting wise, but as far as just baseball on the field, we're going to have some pretty exciting postseason races that are definitely going to be fun to watch. The Red Sox finishing the first half on a 10-game win streak. Now you've got three teams in the AL East within 3 games of each other. The NL East, like two teams that are virtually tied. The Central's really close. The NL West is really going to be close. We're going to have some fun stuff.
Yep, we certainly are. And how do you take a look at the futures with regards to yes, no to make the playoffs? Because I think that that's the most intriguing market right now with who might be the last team to get into the National League or the American League wild card, because I think that that is so intriguing and that feels like a little bit of a crapshoot at this point.
It's interesting. You've got to think about obviously the schedule and the teams, but the thing that's interesting in forecasting it is you kind of got to judge like which GMs, which owners, who's aggressive, who do you think's going to buy? Because the rosters are going to change at the end of this month here. And those are the teams that, we're talking about. Does team X add a power hitter? Does team Y shore up its bullpen and add a reliever? Like those are the kind of players, especially when you're talking about the to make the playoff yes, no markets. Those are the players that decide these things on the margins. And when you're betting something on the margins like that, that's going to be a big deal. So, if you look at that NL wildcard race, you look at right now, the Padres and Giants are battling it out for that last spot. The Giants probably already made their big move with Devers. I wouldn't be shocked if they did something else, but I don't know if they're going to make another huge splash versus, a team like the Padres. They haven't made a huge splash yet. What's out there? Do they go big game hunting? And maybe that pushes them over the top, helping hold off San Francisco, something like that. But I think really looking into who's going to buy, who's going to sell could kind of shed some light into that market.
Yep, I think so as well. And joining me on the show, we do have William Boor, who does such great work over at Action Network, joining me on the Baseball Betting Show. And I do think that it's interesting to see who are going to be buyers and sellers because we have seen some surprise buyers/sellers in the past. Like I go back 2 years ago, the last year of Shohei Ohtani with the Angels, they looked pretty well out of the playoff picture, but they were around 500 and they bought. And then the Brewers, leading the NL Central in the past, have already sold. How do you take a look at that as well and just the past history of these teams in terms of just how they maneuver their rosters? Because I think that that's going to be big for looking at these futures too.
It's tricky because obviously one team doesn't do the same thing every single time. But unless you know someone who can predict the future, the past is kind of all we've got. So you've got to see who's historically been aggressive, who's historically been conservative. And then in that case, it's kind of an educated guessing game. Hopefully, obviously, you get right. But there's also the chance that you bet on a team to buy and they don't. And then you're just kind of like, well, I guess that didn't happen, but hopefully they get hot and win 7 of 10 anyway. It's tough, but it's what gambling is.
Yep, it certainly is, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens there. And is there a team or two in particular that you're taking a look at and you just don't know what to make out of them right now? They might be buyers, they might be sellers, they might be a team that has great value in the futures market, they might have no value whatsoever. Is there a mystery team out there for you that you're just going to need to see something from over the next week or two after we head out of the break?
I'm really curious to see what Boston does. Trading Devers made it seem like, you're going to be sellers, and then they go rip off 10 straight, and now they're right in the thick of the wild card race and the AL East race. So like, do you sell Devers and then become a buyer? Like that's such a weird juxtaposition. But if you see where they're at in the standings right now, like that makes sense and is probably the way to go. It's just kind of one of those weird things, like the way it worked out. And then I think the Arizona Diamondbacks are going to be interesting. They probably should sell like 11 out in the division, 5.5 in the wild card. I just don't get the sense that they're going to. I saw Rosenthal mention the other day that if they decide to just trade one of their starters, they're only going to trade one. So they might only do kind of a half sale. which is interesting. It does set you up better, right, obviously, for 26 and 27. But if they only trade one, so do they trade Gallen? Do they trade Merrill Kelly? If so, those are intriguing pieces to whoever gets them, and I'm kind of curious about what happens there.
Yeah, with the Arizona Diamondbacks, I know that that's one that was brought up actually a few weeks ago. It's just really fascinating to see what we're going to be getting out of the Arizona Diamondbacks in general. As joining me on the show, we do have William Boor. He does such great work taking a look at this great game of baseball, joining me on the Baseball Betting Show. And I do think that the Diamondbacks are the big one. And how far do you think that they might be willing to sell in terms of someone like an Eugenio Suarez? You mentioned Zach Gallen. Is there any players that you think might be relatively untouchable for them?
Well, I mean, the obvious one's Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll is definitely untouchable.
Yeah.
I would assume Marte is as well, because I don't know what you would get back that would make that worth it. But otherwise, yes, I mean, Suarez has been really good for them. But, if you got to sell, you got to sell. I'm just not sure how committed they're in this weird middle ground, but I think they're going to wind up selling unless they win their first like 6, 7 games out of the break. And they talk themselves into something, but it will be interesting to see. I think Gallen and Kelly are the big ones, and you kind of see what happens there. You trade one, maybe you try and re-sign one, and then you run it back. You run it back in 26, building around Carroll and Marte, that offense.
Yep, I do think that that's interesting. And it was Bob Nightingale who I was talking to that was saying that, the Arizona Diamondbacks, they might be sellers at the market. And I think what the Cincinnati Reds do is interesting as well, because right now they're on the outside looking in terms of the playoffs, but they're a team that has been catching a little bit of steam. They've got some really good pitching. And the offense, if you look at run production itself, has not been bad, but still, it's one of these teams where I feel like outside of Ellie De La Cruz, you just don't know what you're going to get out of them. And I think that's a team that is very much worth watching over the next few weeks, too.
I agree. And I think they're a team that maybe you do a half sell, or maybe you do like a mini buy, whereas you buy someone who's got, 2 or 3 years of control left. Because the thing with a team like the Reds, and I guess the Diamondbacks kind of fit in this category too, is let's say the Reds sneak into the playoffs, they get that last wild card spot. That would be awesome, and that would be great for them. But they're not as good as the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Phillies, the Mets. Like, if they get into the playoffs, I think that's a success. For them to it's not realistic for them to buy enough to actually become World Series contenders. So where's that threshold? Do you push and just get to the wild card spot and say, like, hey, this is a heck of a year, this is something we want to build on? Or do you kind of sell knowing, hey, we're not going to win it all this year? If I were them, I would really start looking toward 26 and 27. I wouldn't sell, but if you've got a reliever, if you've got someone that you can maybe acquire who you will be able to have, in 26, maybe also in 27, I think that's an interesting way for the Reds to kind of approach things.
Yep, the Reds are a team that I think is very much of intrigue. And then I just looked at that AL Central wildcard, or the AL wildcard race in general, involving a lot of teams out there in the Central. And there's just a hodgepodge there because for the Texas Rangers, they finally started hitting before the All-Star break. We have been waiting and waiting for it. They finally got something going. They're about 3.5 games out of the final wildcard spot. The Twins, the Angels, the Royals, the Guardians, all between 4 and 4.5 games out as well. I think that all of these teams are so interesting these next few weeks because you go on a nice run the next 2 weeks, you might find yourself as that final wildcard team. A bad next 2 weeks, you might be 7 games out.
The AL Central and the AL West, I guess, is going to be really interesting to watch with the next 2 weeks because that will, like you said, that'll determine which teams are going to be buyers and sellers in the AL. If someone goes and wins 10 of their next 12, 10 of their next 15, they're probably buyers. Conversely, if you go 5 and 9 right out of the break, you're probably going to be like, okay, let's sell. It's wild that you play all these games over the first half and then it's going to come down to like these next 6. But you mentioned, I mean, if we're looking at this, I'm looking at the Guardians schedule right now out of the break. They open with 3 at home against the A's, 4 at home against the Orioles. So that's 7 straight at home, 3 at Kansas City, and then 3 at home versus the Rockies right before the trade deadline. So you've got 4, 5, 6, 10 games against Orioles, A's, and Rockies before the trade deadline. If Cleveland makes a run in those 10 games, that becomes very interesting.
Yep, it certainly does. And is there any other teams that you're taking a look at right now, and either you're feeling bullish or bearish about them going into the second half of the season?
I really like what Seattle's doing. Maybe I'm just talking myself into it because I've got a future on them, but I really do like that team. I think going into this season, we knew that they could pitch, assuming everyone stayed healthy. But their offense, shout out Cal Raleigh, has been a lot better than I expected, which is, making the whole team as a whole better than I expected. And that's been really encouraging to see.
Yep, and with the Seattle Mariners, the top guys have been very good in the bullpen. Matt Brash, Andres Munoz. I love what they've been able to provide, and I always love the fact that you're able to provide such great insights. William, you do an amazing job taking a look at this great game of baseball and so much more over at Action Network. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, of course. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at WBoor, WBOOR. If you just want the picks, I'm in the Action Network app at William Boor _, all one word. But be sure to check out the Action Network app and actionnetwork.com for everything me and my colleagues are doing. We have betting predictions, betting picks, odds for pretty much every baseball game every day. We've got WNBA covered. We've got NBA Summer League up. And obviously, coming up at the end of the month and into August, we're going to hit full. We'll have NFL preseason games. We'll have futures articles, and then obviously get everything running up for the season as well. So plenty of stuff now and lots more to come.
Absolutely. William doing an amazing job taking a look at this great game of baseball, and his time is always appreciated. Big thanks to William for joining me on the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Baseball Betting Show, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. A little bit of a shorter podcast today, and you're going to be getting a little bit of a shorter one until games return, but we will be back Friday morning when those games return, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.